The Christmas lights had never felt so cruel. They blinked and sparkled across the grand ballroom of the Harrington Hotel in downtown Chicago, casting everything in red and gold, while Vivienne stood in the corner with a pen trembling in her hand and tears she refused to let fall burning behind her eyes. Everyone around her was laughing, clinking champagne flutes, swaying to holiday music that felt like a cruel joke. And she was signing away 7 years of her life on a set of papers her husband Marcus had slid across the table without even looking her in the eye. He had chosen this night deliberately. She knew that now. Marcus Caldwell was the kind of man who liked to win, and he had decided that ending their marriage at his company's Christmas party, in front of colleagues and clients, would be his final act of dominance over her. He wanted her to feel small. He wanted witnesses to her silence. And as Vivienne pressed the pen to the signature line, her hand shaking and her chest caving in, she realized he was getting exactly what he wanted. If you believe in second chances, in kindness, and in the truth finding its way to the light, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to this channel. Stories like Vivienne's remind us that we are never as alone as we feel in our darkest moments. Vivienne had met Marcus at 23, fresh out of a community college in Springfield, Illinois, working double shifts at a diner to keep herself afloat. She had no family to speak of, or so she believed. She had been raised by her aunt, a quiet, nervous woman named Roberta, who told Vivienne from the time she was old enough to ask that her parents had died in a car accident when she was just 2 years old. Vivienne had accepted that story the way orphan children learn to accept things. Not because they believe it, but because asking too many questions only deepens the wound. Marcus had seemed like salvation. He was charming and successful, a rising executive in a Chicago real estate firm, and he had looked at Vivienne like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. She had loved him with everything she had. She had ironed his shirts and laughed at his jokes and forgiven his coldness on the bad nights and told herself that love was supposed to be work. But somewhere in the last 2 years, the work had become only hers to do. Marcus had stopped coming home for dinner. He had stopped asking how her day went. And 6 months ago, she had found the texts, messages to a woman named Brooke, full of plans and promises that should have belonged to Vivienne. She had not screamed. She had not thrown anything. She had quietly closed his phone, set it back on the nightstand, and gone to the bathroom to sit on the cold tile floor until the shaking stopped. That was who Vivienne was. She absorbed pain like a sponge and showed the world a steady face. So on this Christmas Eve, in this glittering ballroom, she signed her name on the last line, capped the pen, and handed the papers back to Marcus without a single word. He smirked, actually smirked, and tucked them into his jacket pocket. Then he walked away toward Brooke, who was waiting near the bar in a red dress, and Vivienne stood alone among the tinsel and the laughter and felt the floor shift beneath her feet. She slipped out through a side door into the hotel corridor, pressing her back against the cold wall, finally allowing one tear, then another, to slide down her face. She was 30 years old. She had no savings Marcus hadn't controlled. She had no family. She had nothing but a small apartment lease that expired in January and a heart that had been quietly breaking for years. What she did not know, what she could not have imagined, was that 40 feet away, seated in a private dining room just off that same corridor, a man named Theodore Whitfield was celebrating his 68th birthday with a small group of lawyers and advisors. Theodore Whitfield was not merely wealthy. He was the kind of wealthy that reshaped cities, a self-made billionaire who had built a real estate and technology empire across the United States over 4 decades. Forbes had written about him. Presidents had called him. And for the last 28 years, he had been searching, quietly and desperately, for the daughter he had lost. It had not been a car accident. Theodore's daughter had not died. She had been taken, spirited away by a bitter former partner and placed with a distant relative, a nervous woman named Roberta, with false documents and a fabricated story designed to keep Theodore's daughter hidden as leverage in a business dispute that had turned deeply personal. Theodore had spent millions on private investigators. He had followed dozens of cold leads. And then, 3 weeks ago, a retired investigator named Gordon had delivered a file to Theodore's desk in his penthouse on Michigan Avenue, a file with a name, a birthday, a photograph, and a DNA report. The name in that file was Vivienne. Theodore had been trying to reach her for 3 weeks through careful, legal channels, not wanting to frighten her. His attorney had sent a certified letter to her apartment address. He had not yet heard back. He did not know she was in this very hotel tonight. His assistant, a sharp young woman named Claudette, had stepped into the hallway to take a phone call when she noticed a woman sitting on the floor against the wall, knees drawn to her chest, tears on her cheeks, still wearing a name tag from the ballroom event. Claudette looked at the name tag. Then she looked at the photograph she had been carrying in her portfolio for 3 weeks on Theodore's instructions. A photograph his investigator had taken as part of confirming the identification. Her breath caught in her throat. She walked back into the private dining room with measured steps, leaned down beside Theodore's chair, and whispered 4 words into his ear. Theodore went completely still. Then he pushed back his chair, stood up, and walked into the hallway. When he saw Vivienne sitting there on the floor, her dark hair falling across her face, her shoulders curved inward with exhaustion and grief, he stopped walking. His hand came up to cover his mouth. Because she looked exactly like her mother had looked at that age, and the resemblance was so complete and so devastating that it nearly brought this 68-year-old man, who had built skyscrapers and survived boardroom wars, to his knees. He crouched down slowly in front of her. Vivienne looked up, startled, expecting to see a hotel employee asking her to move along. Instead she saw a stranger with kind eyes that were full of tears, and something in his face. Something in the particular set of his jaw and the shape of his brow, sent an inexplicable wave of recognition through her that she could not explain. He told her his name. He told her he had been searching for her for 28 years. He told her about the investigator, the file, the DNA report, the certified letter she had likely never opened because Marcus had controlled the mail. He pulled the photograph from Claudette's portfolio and held it out to her with trembling hands. A photograph of a young woman who could have been Vivienne's twin, taken 30 years ago in a garden in Connecticut. Her mother. Alive in that photograph. Radiant. Gone now for 6 years, Theodore explained softly, but gone knowing that Theodore had never stopped looking. The Christmas party continued 40 feet away. Glasses clinked. Music played. Marcus stood with Brooke by the bar, already forgetting the woman he had discarded. And in the corridor, Vivienne sat on the floor of a Chicago hotel and discovered that the life she thought she knew had been built on a lie. And that the real one, the true one, had been waiting for her all along. What happened next shocked everyone who witnessed it. Theodore Whitfield stood up, extended his hand to his daughter, and when she took it and rose to her feet, he pulled her into an embrace so fierce and so full of 28 years of aching absence that Vivienne stopped trying to hold anything back. She wept openly, completely, without shame, into the shoulder of a father she had never known she had. And every person in that corridor, attorneys, hotel staff, strangers passing through, went completely silent. Speech balloon before we reach the end, drop the word "found" in the comments if this story moved you. Let Vivienne know she is not alone. Let every person watching know that the truth has a way of finding us, even when we have stopped believing it will. Vivienne did not go back to the apartment that January. She did not need to. She spent Christmas morning in a penthouse on Michigan Avenue, surrounded by her father's staff who treated her with a gentleness she had not experienced in years, learning the shape of a life that had always belonged to her. The divorce was finalized quietly, and Marcus, who discovered only weeks later exactly who his ex-wife turned out to be, could only watch from a distance as Vivienne stepped into her inheritance, her identity, and herself. She never became cruel. She never sought revenge. That was not who she was. But she stood taller. She laughed more freely. And every Christmas Eve after that, she and Theodore lit the tree together in his great house in Lake Forest, Illinois, and she allowed herself to believe, fully, without apology, that she was exactly where she was always meant to be. If this story reached something inside you, if it reminded you that lost things can be found, that pain is not permanent, and that one unexpected moment can rewrite everything,